Ever wonder, like, if this is all there is, what happens after we die? It's a question that has bothered people forever, right?
Right.
And one idea that tries to explain this whole thing is samsara. You've probably heard of it, the cycle of birth and death and rebirth.
Yeah.
So we're going to take a deep dive today into an article called Cycle of Birth and Death. Let's know about the worsen to get rid of it.
Okay.
We'll explore the whole rebirth thing, look at it from different religions, see if we can figure out if we're stuck in this cycle forever.
That's a big one, yeah. It's so interesting how this idea of rebirth, or reincarnation as most people call it, it pops up everywhere. Different cultures, different religions, really makes you think.
Totally. So let's just start with the basics for anyone who is, new to this whole thing. The basic idea is that after you die, your soul gets reborn into a new life.
Right.
And the quality of that life depends on your actions, your karma from your past lives.
Like cosmic cause and effect, almost.
Yeah.
The article actually said we're like puppets, basically, playing roles that our karma decided for us. Ever feel like you're on a path that's already been, set?
Oh, yeah.
Maybe this idea explains that feeling.
Whoa, that's deep. And it's not like a one-time thing, right?
No.
This rebirth cycle, it's often called samsara, a Sanskrit word that means like wandering through, suggests it could be an endless journey, life, death, rebirth, life, death, rebirth. But is it just a neutral cycle, or is there more to it? Like, is it a trap we have to escape?
Now, that's the question, isn't it? And different religions have different answers. Let's start with Hinduism, the Bhagavad Gita specifically. It's pretty clear. The soul is eternal.
Okay.
Doesn't die with the body.
The Gita actually uses some really strong language to describe this. It says, and I'm quoting here, "Neither is it born at any time, nor does it die, and nor is it after having born going to come into existence again, because it is unborn, eternal, ever-existing, and primeval. It is not even killed when the body is killed." That's intense. So if the soul doesn't die, where does it go?
Well, according to the Gita, it's the three gunas that decide where we go next.
Gunas.
Yeah. Think of them as like qualities or energies that affect our actions and then our rebirth.
Okay, I'm following. Break down these gunas for me.
Okay, so you've got sattva, which is all about purity, goodness, knowledge.
Okay,
Then there's rajas, linked to passion, activity, restlessness.
gotcha.
And then tamas. That one's more about ignorance, darkness, inertia. So the Gita says whichever guna is strongest in your life, that's going to shape your next rebirth. Ever feel pulled on different directions by, I don't know, like desires or duty or just confusion?
All the time.
The Gita might say that's the gunas battling it out.
That actually makes a lot of sense. It's like a whole new way of understanding why we do what we do.
Exactly. And it shows how our choices have consequences that go way beyond just this one life.
Yeah.
It's not just about being good. It's about understanding these deeper forces that are shaping our journey through this whole samsara thing.
Right. And the article doesn't stop at the Gita, right? It also mentions a verse by a Kabir Sahib Ji, like a mystic poet from India.
Oh, yeah. Kabir?
He writes, "Iklevek devadutam, koi kisi kapita na bhutam, rin samban jura ek tatha, and samay sab barabata."
Right, which basically means we're all connected through this cycle of karma, death, rebirth.
Beautiful. It's like we're all part of this massive tapestry woven together through like lifetimes.
I like that, the tapestry.
So you've got Hinduism embracing rebirth, and there's another big Eastern religion that shares a similar belief, Buddhism. Like Hinduism, Buddhists also believe in rebirth, but they picture it as this wheel of life, which again takes us back to samsara.
And in Buddhism, they really focus on how much suffering there can be in this cycle.
Oh yeah, the wheel of life, it shows the 6 realms of existence: gods, demigods, humans, animals, hungry ghosts, and hell beings.
Whoa.
Each realm is like a different level of existence with different levels of suffering.
Like the vastness of existence, right? So many different forms. Makes you think outside of our little human perspective.
Totally. It reminds us that this life, with all its ups and downs, is just one tiny piece of a much bigger picture.
Yeah.
But while Hinduism and Buddhism are all about rebirth, some other religions see it differently, like Islam, for example.
Now, this is where it gets interesting. The article says that a lot of Islamic scholars believe there's no rebirth, just heaven and hell. But then it throws in some verses from the Quran that kind of contradict that.
Yeah, that really stood out to me too. Like Surah Al-Baqarah 2.28, Allah has given you life. Then it will take your life there. Then he will give you life again. What do you make of that?
It's a powerful verse, that's for sure. And there's another one, Surah Al-Anbiya, verses 21 to 104. Allah talks about repeating creation. says the day when we will fold the heaven like the folding of a written sheet for the records. As we began the first creation, we will repeat it. That is a promise binding upon us. Indeed, we will do it.
So is the Quran suggesting rebirth is a thing in Islam, or are these verses, like, symbolic?
That's what Islamic scholars are debating. Some take the verses literally, saying they back up the idea of rebirth.
Okay.
Others say they're metaphorical, just highlighting Allah's power to create.
So even within Islam, there are different ways of looking at these important verses.
Right, and it reminds us that religious texts can be interpreted in many ways. But one thing that all these religions seem to agree on is that actions have consequences.
Absolutely.
Whether it's in this life or the next, our choices matter. They shape who we are, where we end up. Which brings us to another big question. If this cycle of samsara can be so tough, can you break free from it?
Now, that's a question I've always wondered about. If we're trapped in this cycle of birth and death and rebirth, can we ever get out?
That's where things get really, really fascinating. The article says, yes, there is a way to break free. And get this, it pulls in ideas from a bunch of different religions to explain it.
Okay, I'm all ears. What kind of evidence are we talking about?
Well, first it brings up the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 4, verse 34. It talks about getting true knowledge from a Tattvadarshi saint.
Tattvadarshi saint. Not sure I've heard that one before.
Yeah, it's a bit of a mouthful. Basically, it's an idea in some spiritual traditions. It means like a realized master, someone who's broken free from this cycle and knows how to guide others to do the same.
So like a spiritual guide who can show us the way out.
Exactly. And the article ties this to, get this, the Quran, Surah 25.59. It mentions a Bakabar, which in Islam is someone with true knowledge who can set us on the right path.
Interesting. So this idea of a spiritual guide who can help us transcend, it's not limited to just one religion. It keeps popping up.
It's a pattern, for sure. And here's where the article gets really specific. It claims that Saint Rampalji Maharaj is the current Tattvadarshi saint, the one with the key to escaping this whole cycle of birth and death.
Now, that's a pretty big statement. What do you think about that? I mean, not saying you have to agree or disagree with this specific saint, but based on everything we've learned about how different religions view escaping samsara, does it fit in?
That's a really good question. I can't really say if this particular saint is legit, but this idea of a Tattvadarshi saint, yeah, that's definitely out there in various traditions. Lots of faiths believe that you can achieve liberation from samsara if you follow the right spiritual practices or teachings.
So it's not like a crazy idea. Whether this particular saint is the answer is up for debate, I guess?
Right, and you always got to approach these claims carefully. It's just one perspective, even if the article makes it sound sure.
Totally. It's up to each person to figure out what they believe. The article also talks about some common questions people have about rebirth and the afterlife, like Satlok, this realm beyond death. I'd love to hear more about that.
Satlok is pretty cool. It's often described as a place of pure bliss. No death, no suffering, no more rebirth. Like the ultimate escape.
So basically, it's paradise, heaven, nirvana, all rolled into one.
You could say that. It's similar to those ideas found in other religions.
Makes sense. And the article also makes a big deal about how precious human life is.
Yeah, and that ties back into the idea that this life is our shot to break free from samsara. We got to make the most of it.
Right. It's not going to just happen, is it? The article even says that for most beings, when you die, that's it for that life.
True. It's a reminder that liberation isn't guaranteed. It takes effort, making the right choices, committing to spiritual growth.
It's like a wake-up call. Our actions really do shape our journey, not just in this life, but maybe even beyond.
Couldn't agree more. It's not about just living a good life. It's about getting the deeper meaning of our choices and finding a path to true freedom.
This is really making me think about my own life differently. If we are stuck in this samsara cycle, what can we actually do to get out? Does the article give any advice?
Well, it says that true knowledge is the key. And according to the article, Saint Rampalji Maharaj has that knowledge. It goes on to explain his teachings and what you're supposed to do to achieve liberation, according to him.
Okay, so while the idea of needing a spiritual guide is found all over, this article is saying this one specific saint and his teachings are the way.
Exactly. It's advocating for a very specific path. Whether someone chooses to believe that is, totally up to them.
It's definitely a lot to process. I have so many more questions now. I bet our listeners are feeling the same way. We've gone from this big idea of samsara to like specific instructions on how to get out.
Yeah, it's a lot.
I'm sure people have tons of questions.
Definitely. This is the kind of stuff that really makes you think. And actually, the article tries to answer some common questions at the end. Maybe we should go over those.
Good idea. It seems like they knew people would be skeptical, especially about one saint having all the answers. What kind of doubts do they try to address?
Well, one question is about proof. Like, if Satlok is this amazing place after death, how do we know it's real?
Right.
The article says true knowledge comes from experiencing Satlok yourself. which you can do, they say, through the practices St. Rampalji Maharaj teaches.
So it's not just believing blindly, it's about actually having the experience. Interesting. What else do they talk about?
They really emphasize how important human life is. We touched on this before, but they're saying this human form is like a golden ticket. We shouldn't waste it.
Yeah, I get that. Makes this life seem even more important if escaping samsara is actually possible.
Totally. It's like, wake up, this is your chance.
And they're not sugarcoating death either. The article says that for most people, when you die, that's it for that life.
Yeah, no coming back. It's a reminder that liberation isn't just handed to you. You got to work for it.
It seems like they're trying to be realistic, they're offering a way out, but they're also being honest about how hard it is.
Definitely. In the end, it's up to each person to decide. Do you accept that you're stuck in this cycle, or do you try to break free?
And that's really what this whole conversation is about, right?
I think so.
Not telling anyone what to believe, but getting them to think for themselves.
Exactly. Helping people make their own choices based on what they understand and what they've experienced.
Well, this has been quite a deep dive. We've covered so much, starting with the basics of rebirth and samsara, looking at how different religions see it, and then even discussing how to maybe escape the whole thing.
It's been a wild ride. I hope everyone listening found it interesting. It really gets you thinking about life, death, and what it all means.
Absolutely. And on that note, I think we'll wrap it up for today. We've given everyone a lot to think about. Keep exploring these ideas, keep asking questions, and find answers that feel right to you.
Maybe this deep dive will inspire people to learn more about different religions or try some spiritual practices or just think about the big questions in life.
It's a journey worth taking, for sure. I hope everyone will keep exploring these mysteries of life, death, and everything in between. Thanks for joining us. See you next time. 1CO